My name is Emma Bennett. I am Vice President and an Account Executive at Nonprofit Resources. I started doing events even in high school. I think I was part of the prom committee. I really loved the event planning process, but professionally, I've been doing it now for 9 years. I've probably done close to 100 events. That includes probably board meetings, small meetings, and conferences. That can range anywhere from a group of maybe 10 people up to over 1,000. We did a 501 cast with a production company to kind of talk about the difference between virtual, hybrid, and in-person. So I think that the pandemic really pushed us to look at virtual and new ways to do virtual, and very great new technology came out and provided a lot of different ways to interact virtual audiences that we maybe haven't considered before. That said, I do feel like we're going into a new phase where people are looking back to going in person, and it's kind of this question of doing a both and or an either or. So I think my biggest recommendation when considering the type of format for your event, I think the first thing you think of is what the objective is. If you're looking to do more networking, more collaboration, I think that in person is usually the best fit. I would say if you're mainly looking to do education, allow people to get CEUs and crediting, do sponsor promos or more video-based content, virtual, of course, will be the best option there. And then when it comes to hybrid, I always recommend that people do hybrid kind of separately. So if you're going to do an in-person event and offer a virtual component, I generally recommend that you do virtual after the in-person event, because when you do a hybrid meeting, first of all, the cost is much more expensive to try and run them concurrently during the same time frame, but you also kind of dilute the intention for each. So you're kind of splitting your focus between making sure your in-person is engaged while also trying to bring virtual into the in-person room and engaging them. So instead of having split attention, I normally recommend you, if you're going to do hybrid, do in-person, record those sessions, and then do a virtual platform. I think it's really important to be very flexible and agile when you're especially at a live in-person event. If you're virtual, the issues you might experience are technical glitches. So of course, to prepare and try to prevent the issues from happening. When it comes to, virtual, I definitely recommend doing tech checks and runs, as well as when you're doing in-person, making sure all your audio visual is working. I set pretty soft deadlines. I set a lot of soft deadlines for when sponsors and speakers need to give me their materials. For example, a sponsor commercial, I generally request that a month prior to the event, even though technically I maybe need it the day before. I want to make sure that I have those deliverables. I have a chance to run through them and look through them and make sure that, first of all, they're appropriate and relevant, but also that they are going to work on the platform that we are hosting it on. And, there's some different things too legally, like if you're going to have photographers at an in-person event, you have to disclose that to your attendees, that there will be photographers and they should have the right to opt out of that. Same with sponsor communication. If you're going to sell your attendee list afterwards or offer that as a sponsor benefit, you want to make sure attendees have an option to opt out. So kind of going top to bottom and making sure that every facet of the event understands their role, understands the expectation, and kind of what happens if those expectations are not met, really can save you a lot of trouble. Of course, the same thing goes with venue contracts, hotel contracts. Really reading through that fine print to understand what the consequences are, I think, is essential to making sure you don't have surprises that will be debilitating to the event. Thinking about some upcoming events. So I've done a couple events earlier this year, and I have a couple events coming up in the next month. So I actually have 2 back-to-back conferences, and they were kind of, they're very similar, and they're actually going to be in the same city. So I get to be in the same city for 2 weeks, doing both client events. But I think in terms of planning out, the further out that you can solidify kind of a date and location, the better. The more, marketing runway that you have to kind of announce the save the date, get people excited about the event, and then kind of plan from there. That said, I think that people are pretty shy to want to do a lot of long-term planning, especially during the past 3 years. There's been a lot of contract changes, cancellations, and, a lot of associations are just looking at different ways that they're going to structure their event post-pandemic. So I would say that at a minimum, you want to try and at least be 12 to 18 months out. I can say that I have done it in a shorter time frame. I have done it in a lot longer time frame, but I have a template master spreadsheet that I kind of call my event Bible. I think previously some of us are familiar with the big binders that we used to have with the BEO specs and everything, like in a 3-ring binder. So I normally look at the contracts that are in place, when the deposits are due, when the commitment needs to be. And so that kind of sets the timeline for when I'm going to coordinate different facets. There's certain things that you don't want to plan until you have a good understanding of what your sponsorship revenue is going to be, what your attendee count's going to be. But the more that you can do up front, obviously, the better. The sooner that you can at least find a date and location, the more advanced planning you can have, the more marketing, likely the more attendance and sponsorship you would have. When it comes to changing suddenly, I have had a handful of experiences where I've really had to do a quick pivot. Long story short, we basically had to cancel an event a month out and switch to a virtual platform, which I think everybody kind of had some type of experience in the event world. And so I think that when things are out of your control, you have to communicate that to the attendees of, what you tried to do, and then offer a solution to the problem, right? If they're trying to get credits, how are you going to offer those credits without doing that in-person event? So it kind of depends on the severity. I've also just had situations where a speaker doesn't show up to a room, right? I think that if you approach your attendees very hat in hand, understanding that this is kind of, some of these changes can be frustrating. Nobody really likes, especially sudden change. I have seen a lot of events switch to having more general session formats. I think one of the big things that I'm seeing is a lot of shorter presentations. Like I've seen what they call HIT, like high interval training presentations where you only have 15 to 20 minutes to speak, or we'll do round tables. So you do more panel discussions. I think the days of a keynote speaker with a long presentation for several hours where people are sitting in the same seat is not going to get the same response as having shorter engaging sessions. So I would say shorter sessions, but more breaks to allow people to network organically is kind of a trend that I'm seeing in terms of scheduling. I would also say in terms of space layout that I've seen this done several ways, either separate rooms and lounges, or even the little small nooks for people to have kind of ad hoc meetings or quiet workspace. I think that kind of enhances the attendee experiences and also keeps them closer to the event space. So they're not going up to their hotel room to take a meeting. They can just step into a separate room or a quiet space to take that meeting and then get right back into sessions. And then in terms of receptions and fun things, I would say that there's kind of a big push to making events more sustainable. Like everything that, everybody goes to a restaurant now, you can scan a QR code on the table. There's no reason that we couldn't have the same QR code on an attendee's table during lunch and everything, so they can download the schedule and look at it on their phone. So, event apps, things like that, looking towards, I've seen, attendee badges that are biodegradable or even have like plant seeds in them that you plant when you get home. So I think there's a shift to kind of more sustainable options. I think, depending on the hotel and venue that you're with, they'll definitely work with you in terms of making sure that you're providing some more sustainable options to attendees. So I think those are some of the main trends that I'm seeing. Like I said before, I think people are a little shy about booking their events, several years out. So I am seeing kind of this trend for doing things kind of in a shorter confined time span. Which I think is fine, as long as you just consider that, you are going to have to maybe put additional staff to kind of get that event turned around as quickly. And you're not going to have as much bargaining power when you're looking to kind of do your event in a shorter time frame or booking with the hotel. So an association management company is basically, for us, it's a for-profit that helps manage nonprofit associations. So with that, a lot of associations have member meetings, board meetings, conventions, conferences that we help plan top to bottom. So when it comes to event sourcing, we offer that as a service. We have accreditation through True to source hotels and different venues. But of course, we have a lot of partners that we work with, but we facilitate that relationship for the association. So kind of working together in partnership with the association, top to bottom event sourcing, or top to bottom event planning. We offer event and venue sourcing, hotel block sourcing. We do content and speaker recruitment. We help manage different sponsorship and making prospectuses for sponsors and sponsorship recruitment. And then, of course, I think a big thing for a successful event is the marketing facet too. So, doing different promotionals. We found a lot of creative ways to maybe do speaker highlights or, post event videos that will highlight and promote for be a good commercial for the next year. So I think there's a lot of different creative ways that we help with event planning. But I would say that the benefit of doing it with an association management company, especially one that's accredited, is that we're very aware of the different policies and procedures that are needed to run an event, right? So I talked about the photography waiver. I've talked about the opt-out list for attendee list distribution or, promotion, speaker agreements. We already have all of those templates in place from so many different events, because even though the content and the network may change, the whole process is pretty similar, no matter what type of event you're doing or where you're hosting it. We have the experience, we've seen what goes well, what you need to avoid. And, in terms of the financial costs too, I would say there's great savings. Like I said, I'm going to an event where there's 2 back-to-back events, and we're able to work with vendors and say, hey, this event has this budget, this one has this budget. Can you work with us for both? So there's kind of the cost share benefit that you get, especially with an association management company. In terms of downside risk, I think that the only thing that I see as maybe a potential downside risk is that, you do pay money to have an event planner. In terms of a cost benefit analysis, I feel like ultimately you probably, with having a dedicated staff member to help with sponsorship recruitment, set the budget, understand how to negotiate with vendors, you probably end up saving money, but there is a little bit of money up front when it comes to hiring an outside vendor, of course, or an outside expert. We set the standard for, doing what's best for your attendees and your sponsors. So we really come from a people first perspective of how can we benefit, all the different people that are going to be attending here? How can we really create a creative and engaging experience so that when they go home, they're excited about the next event coming up? We have seen and done a lot in the event space, and that, we are looking to make sure that your event is something that your members and your network constantly talk about, and really create that brand recognition for the event is our number one priority. All right, thank you so much for watching. Once again, my name is Emma Bennett. I am Vice President and Account Executive at Nonprofit Resources. If you're interested in learning more about our events and other association management services that we offer, please visit our website, nonprofitresources.us. I would be more than happy to set up time to talk with you and maybe even do an audit to see if our event planning services are right for you. Thank you so much.